Hey, I'd like to welcome you to another episode of the Mission Matters Business Podcast, your source for all things business. My name is Adam Torres. You can follow me on Instagram at AskAdamTorres to keep up with my book releases, book tour schedule, signings, all that other good stuff. Always love to connect with you there. And as always, if you'd like to apply to become a co-author of one of my upcoming books, just head on over to the website, missionmatters.com, and click on Become an Author to Apply. All right, today I have Jonathan Brickman on the line. He's the managing director over at Brickseller. Jonathan, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks, Adam. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
So excited about today's topic. So we're going to talk about early stage company growth and what that looks like. But before we do that, let's get a little bit further into what you're doing over at Brickseller. Tell us a little bit more about the company, please.
Yeah, so this is kind of a result of me spending probably 20, 25 years of doing startups, early growth companies, and having experience, literally starting from an idea all the way through exit. And I guess as I'm in my trimester of business here, I've been giving back in the form of mentorship and doing advisory work. And, what I found along the way is that there's a lot of early stage companies, startups, that need help because they haven't done it before. So it's a lot easier today than it was when I was getting started to actually tap into resources. So, I'm one of the resources that helps these companies get organized and get started and start to scale.
What are the right types of companies that are typically a good fit for Brickseller? Because there's a lot of business owners, entrepreneurs, executives listening, and at the end of this, I'm going to ask you to leave your website or how can people connect with you. I just want to make sure the right kind of people follow up. What are the right types of companies you like working with?
Yeah, so that's a good question. I definitely have my lane. I like B2B, business to business, SaaS, software solutions. Anywhere where there's a software solution that we're solving a business problem. That's my sweet spot. I'm not a B2C consumer product guy. It's business to business solution selling.
What kind of any kind of trends that you're noticing in your space, specifically from maybe even the SaaS end of things? Because the last couple of years, those companies are getting funded like crazy. So a lot of them are taking off. We hear about these, these unicorns, these things happening. Any kind of trends that you're noticing right now that just interest you?
Yeah, the most interesting trend I see is how early these things are getting started. From kids being teenagers to, a lot of them either still in school or just graduated from college. People are getting started much, much sooner. I wasn't involved with my first startup until my mid-30s. And I invariably work with, guys that are just out of college, in their early mid-20s and even younger. So that's a huge change. Yeah.
It's funny that you say that because I've actually had quite a few people on the podcast that were startups that are still in college, and it throws me off sometimes because I'm like, wait a minute, you're in your third year in college, and I think about what I was doing in my third year in college, and I'm like, man, things have changed.
It's actually very true. I think of one example of a guy that contacted me. He was in his senior year of college, and he had created a platform for undergraduates to do research with faculty. And that was his first business. He's had 3 since then, and he's on his way to raising, before this virus came along, about a $15 million round at like a $50 million valuation. And he's 26 years old.
Unbelievable. I love it. This makes me excited. This gets me excited to know that our future's okay right there. 26-year-old doing something like that. That's amazing. So Jonathan, let's get into today's topic. So early stage company growth. I guess where I like to start with that one is I like to usually start with the bad. Where do you find that entrepreneurs or business owners typically are making some of the pitfalls that they run into when kind of in that early stage company growth stage?
Yeah, it's actually quite easy. I have enough data points to have pretty strong conviction about where they get in trouble. And the biggest challenge is most of these are started by technologists or academics or somebody that has some, obsession with some product. And that's what they focus on. They tend to be very inward focused. They focus on the product. They focus on software development, and the last thing they think about is like, how do I make this a business? So that is the biggest challenge of getting them to start thinking about how do I start monetizing and building, a business around this great idea that I have, right? So that's the biggest issue. The second biggest issue that I encounter is the founder to let go of their business and allow somebody else to come in with a different skill set that can help them scale, right? And so unfortunately, I run into that a lot of times where, there's a lot of ego involved and they don't want me to come in there and provide my opinions. It takes a while to earn that trust.
Yeah, definitely. That whole bottleneck thing, it's a thing. I know it is 100%. I suffered for that for years. And I don't know, for me, I don't think I was ego, but it's just your baby, right? And that's how every entrepreneur is. It's their baby. It's like some people it's ego, but for me, it was just my baby, and I was just scared. And my business didn't really start growing until I brought in people that knew a lot about some of the other things we were doing than I did, and I was able to just let go. And I'll tell you what, for all the founders out there right now that are suffering from that bottleneck syndrome, which I suffered from for years, it's so nice to be on the other side. I mean, it's so daunting and so taxing on you to have to do everything, or feel you have to, or that you're the only person that can do something. Once you get to that other side of actually bringing in people that are better than you for certain things, and then you realize that you're like, I can breathe. Like there's light at the end of the road on that one, huh, Jonathan?
Well, I mean, listen, absolutely. I mean, Tom Brady, I don't know if you like the Patriots, but I'm a New England guy, so I'll refer to Tom Brady. But, he's the quarterback, right? So his job is to orchestrate the team, right? So they can move down the field. And that should be the job of the CEO. They're setting the vision, but they're putting all the players on the field in the right position so they can actually execute. But it takes a while for people to make that leap instead of thinking they have to do everything, and they're in the middle of every process. Right. So,
completely agree. So let's say that you have a company out there and they're starting to get some traction and they're in that growth mode, and it's like, oh man, this thing's gonna work. What's the first thing that kind of comes to your mind in terms of coaching or consulting to them? Just in general, what theme comes to your mind first with something they're going to be facing?
Yeah. So that's a great question, because what you're really talking about now is like you get some traction.
Like it's going to work. You're like, oh my gosh, it's going to work. You got that oh crap moment.
Which is really the hardest part of any business, right? Getting market fit, getting validation, knowing that somebody's going to actually pay for your product or service. That is really the hardest thing to accomplish. After that, it's really just like, putting the army on the field. It's all about process, right? So now you have to figure out, like, how do I build a process around that so it's repeatable and I can plug people into the roles and I can start to execute consistently, get people up to speed fast, right, and start to scale. That's what I think about next. It's like, how do I create models so I can start replicating this in a consistent way?
No, I love it. And the model part, that was, it's tricky because now you're if you go back to your first tip and thinking about getting out of the way of yourself a little bit, and then now you're to that model stage. I feel like every single one of these stages you get to as an entrepreneur, like you have to grow obviously inwardly, but also outwardly and in your skill set, whether it's management, whether it's all these different hurdles that come to you that maybe you weren't prepared for.
Yeah. And listen, the other thing you learn too as you go through this, it takes a different mindset. From the person that starts a business might only be able to take it so far. Then there's somebody that can take it from a startup idea to 5 million. Then there's another guy that can take it from 5 to 20, right? So there's all different skill sets that you need for the different stages of growth, and you just have to sort of step back and acknowledge what you need. What are the resources you need depending on where you are in the business?
That's awesome. Well, Jonathan, I can talk to you about this all day long, but we're about out of time. That being said, if somebody's listening to this and they want more information on Brickseller or to connect and to learn more about your work, what's the best way for them to reach out?
Yeah, so it's easy. My URL is simply my name, jebrickman.com. And my phone number is 240-670-5323.
Fantastic. Well, hey, Jonathan, really appreciate you coming on the show today and sharing those tips for our audience and also for me. As you can tell, it's like I think part of the reason I do this podcast is therapy, Jonathan. I learn. It's a reminder all day long. It's like, thank you. I appreciate that. So, again, seriously, thank you for coming on the show today. And to the audience, as always, thank you for tuning in. Hope you got a lot of value out of this. Hope you learned a lot. I sure did. If you did, don't forget, subscribe to the podcast. Leave me a review on the Apple iTunes Store. And if you're watching this in our YouTube channel, Mission Matters Business, definitely give us a subscribe there. But also leave us some comments in the comment section. I mean, love to know what kind of things you're working on, what kind of projects and businesses you have going. And Jonathan, thanks again for coming on the show.